Why are people still using film when digital is so available and so cheap?
Because it is so available. I think, there are many reasons, and one of them is that nowadays we all have a great digital camera in our pockets 24/7. And I do think that, especially for a younger generation, that first of all, it makes a nice new access point into photography for everyone. And then it can get very boring if you're really, I think it gets boring more easily nowadays with digital because we all have great cameras with us all the time. So when you get interested in photography and you are aware that everyone around you can shoot high quality images all the time, you want to get deeper into the topic, I think, and you want to learn more about it. And that is why you try film if you're at all interested in standing out a little bit from the mainstream, I think.
True. I think especially like you were saying, for younger people who grew up with only digital, it's like for them finding out about film and analog photography is very exciting because it's totally new, feels more artsy, it's not so accessible, you can get a better quality, you think.
And you've had a number of student groups come into the darkroom recently,
yes,
right?
I just had one the other day.
Yeah, what is their reaction like? A lot of young people,
young kids love it. I had a private lesson the other day with an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they were just loving it, having so much fun. Because they know about phones, obviously, but that's not exciting. It's not new.
Well, I've always shot film. I'm pre-digital. And for me, the process of shooting a camera, waiting for the film or developing it myself was part of the process of photography. I think that's changed a great deal. I think for what we do at Penumbra, there are two different camps. There are people who have always done film and then, transitioned into digital. Didn't like that, came back, but there are young people who've never had a film camera, picked up the film camera and liked the process of it. But I just want to point out from my perspective, what got me more into the historical, analog, or alternative photographic processes was the worry that film was going to disappear. So this is an approach. That's one aspect of it. So in learning what played collodion or some of these other processes, the idea was to make your own film. For those worried about film disappearing, to get into the thinginess of it, you have a thing. You have something that hopefully will outlive us all. A digital file may or may not. Electricity may continue to be or it may not. Your files may get corrupted and lost. Your iPhone can get lost. Mine has. I can't find most of my digital files because I didn't archive them correctly. So the thinginess of it is to have it. The process with which to make photographs is different than analog because you have to take time, and there's the element of time. Going in the darkroom, being with yourself, and thinking, the contemplative aspect to it. But another aspect, which I think is very important for me, and I think people who practice film and other processes, is that it's uniquely different than digital. Digital is sameness. Anybody with a digital camera at this point, they talk about in these blogs, this is sharper, this is more contrast. It all really looks the same. There's a flattening. It's really the sameness of it, and in some ways that's good. It's like, NASCAR, right? Everybody has the same car. And, you have to prove yourself by how well you drive. So if you're an artist, if you have a particular personal vision, if you have a particular way that you want to express yourself, I think digital is limiting. I think finding different processes that fit with your particular way of seeing opens up creativity and expression. The example I like to use is, my son, who we started him on drums, he didn't like it. We tried violin, he didn't like it. We put him on the piano, he struggled through that. Recently, he picked up a guitar, can't pull it out of his hands. So the idea is to find the right fit. I think it's important to keep all of these processes, film, other processes, alive, because you never know what's going to be the right fit, what's going to give the person, that ability to enjoy the process itself, and what particular process will allow them to express themselves in a particular unique way. And photography, for the most part, is a subjective thing. Everybody finds their own voice. So adding process to it is yet another element to that.
Lonnie, you have anything to add?
I mean, sorry. Kind of. At the dawn of the dissemination of the computer age, I guess I was endowed with having been living in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I watched as the world changed and became this sort of repository for this amazing new technology that was sweeping the world. So at the time I chose to align myself with, in the East Bay, in Oakland, with stonecutters and letterpress operators, people who were hand-setting type and actually cutting words into stone, probably the most sort of prehistoric thing that anybody could do. And one of my reasoning at that point, back in the 70s, was that I believed then as I do now, which is that people, that's fine, because there have always been these technological revolutions that have occurred. People introduced sticks and horses, people introduced wind power and sails, people introduced all these amazing new machines that would eventually change the world. But as all of those kinds of technologies evolved, the thing that remained constant was our reliance on our own kind of inspiration and ingenuity. The human hand hasn't really ever taken the place of anything that we've managed to produce. So I always believed, and I still believe, that because we're human, we always go back to anything that we can make with our own hands, which is where we find ourselves this evening, discussing what we can produce in a small, dark room, splashing around in the water, using an antiquated technology, this thing that was basically hasn't changed since the inception of the medium. That's just me.